There's something quietly powerful about people who keep their lives to themselves. You know the type. They show up, they listen, they observe everything. But they rarely speak about what's happening inside. No constant updates, no emotional broadcasts, no need to prove they exist by sharing every thought, every meal, every moment. And here's what haunts people about them. Why? Why would anyone choose invisibility when the entire world is screaming for attention? What do they know that we don't? And maybe more importantly, what are they protecting? Because here's the truth nobody tells you. The people who share the least often feel the most. We're living in the age of exposure, where privacy feels like punishment and silence looks like sadness. Where if you're not posting, you're not present. If you're not visible, you're forgotten. But some people never bought into that. They move through life like shadows in a bright room, watching, absorbing, never performing. And psychology tells us something beautiful about these people. They're not hiding because they're broken. They're quiet because they understand something most of us forgot. Not everything precious needs to be seen. See, there's an entire emotional architecture behind choosing privacy. It's built on self-awareness, emotional independence, and something rare in today's world, the courage to exist without applause. Today we're going deep into the minds of those who keep their lives private, not because they're afraid, but because they've learned that some things, grief, growth, love, transformation, are too sacred to turn into content. And by the end, you might realize you've been one of them all along. Let me ask you something painful. When was the last time you experienced something beautiful and didn't immediately think about how to share it? That split second where joy becomes performance, where the sunset turns into a caption, where your achievement isn't complete until someone else validates it with a heart or a thumbs up. That reflex? It's not natural. It's trained. Psychologists call it self-presentational pressure, the invisible audience watching your every move, even when you're alone. And it's exhausting, because you stop living for yourself. You start living for perception. But people who keep their lives private, they broke free from that prison. Maybe it happened slowly. Maybe they used to share everything until one day it stopped feeling real. They realized they weren't documenting their life. They were auditioning. Every photo carefully angled, every word measured for likes, every emotion filtered through. Will this make me look weak? And one day they just stopped. No announcement, no dramatic exit, just a quiet disappearance from the noise. And here's what broke them free. They started valuing what couldn't be posted. The imperfect moments, the messy growth, the private tears, the unwitnessed victories, the kind of depth that doesn't translate into pixels. There's a concept in psychology called psychological ownership. The feeling that something belongs deeply, intimately to you, your memories, your struggles, your transformations. But the moment you post it, that ownership fades. It becomes public property, open to judgment, misinterpretation, mockery. So they guard their moments like sacred texts. They keep their joy untouchable, their pain private, their growth unseen. And maybe that's not loneliness. Maybe it's the most profound form of self-respect. Here's what people misunderstand about those who stay private. They think silence means emptiness. But it's the opposite. The quietest people often carry the loudest storms inside. They're not absent. They're overflowing. They just refuse to turn their depth into a performance. Because here's the cruel irony. Social media was designed to connect us, but it left us lonelier than ever. We scroll through hundreds of lives and still feel unseen. We share our pain with thousands and still feel misunderstood. We collect likes like currency and still feel worthless. And those who stepped away, they're rebuilding something ancient, something real. Connection without proof. They've learned who checks on them without needing an update, who remembers them without reminders, who loves them without seeing their highlight reel. And that kind of intimacy, raw, unbroadcasted, earned, feels heavier, warmer, infinitely more real. There's a beautiful phrase from philosophy: to be is to be perceived. But people who keep their lives private challenge that. They're saying, I exist beyond your perception. My worth isn't tied to your witness. They might scroll through your stories, smiling quietly at your joy, aching silently at your pain. But they rarely project their own, because they understand something most of us forgot. Not everything you experience is meant to be witnessed. Some of the most transformative moments of your life, the nights you cried alone, the mornings you chose to keep going, the quiet promises you made to yourself, happen in total darkness. No audience, no applause, just you and the raw truth of being human. And when you've lived through enough of those private transformations, you realize being unseen is not the same as being insignificant. In fact, it's where identity is formed, not performed. But let's be honest about something painful. Not everyone who stays private is doing it from a place of peace. Some are hiding because they're terrified of judgment, of rejection, of being misunderstood in a world that moves too fast to listen. They want to be seen, but only truly, not superficially, not through filters and captions. They crave depth in a world drowning in shallowness. So they retreat, not because they don't care, but because the cost of visibility feels unbearable. There's a kind of emotional fatigue that comes from watching everyone's highlight reels while you're still struggling with your behind the scenes. You start comparing even when you don't mean to. You start questioning your worth even when you know better. And the algorithm doesn't care. It just keeps feeding you evidence that everyone else has it figured out. Everyone else is thriving. Everyone else is loved, except you. So some people step away, not out of bitterness, but self-preservation. They realize they don't owe the world a performance. They don't need to keep proving they're happy just to be believed. And maybe that silence carries a grief nobody talks about. The grief of feeling invisible while everyone around you seems to glow. The ache of wondering if choosing privacy makes you forgettable. There are nights, long, heavy nights, where they wonder, am I missing out? Am I falling behind? Does my life still matter if nobody's watching it unfold? And those doubts are real. They're valid, they hurt, but here's what keeps them grounded. Their worth doesn't disappear when nobody's looking. It's still there, steady, quiet, like the hum of a room after a storm. You know what happens when you stop performing your life? Something magical and terrifying. You start actually living it. Colors look richer. Time slows down. Conversations feel fuller. You're not thinking about angles or lighting or how this moment will look to strangers. You're just there, fully present, fully alive. And that presence? It's the rarest currency in a world built on distraction. People who keep their lives private have mastered something most of us are still chasing: internal validation. Their sense of worth comes from within, not from likes, comments, or shares. Psychologists call this an internal locus of control, and it's one of the strongest predictors of emotional resilience and life satisfaction. They don't need the digital echo of "you're enough" to believe it. They already know. And studies back this up. People who take breaks from social media, from posting, from consuming, from performing, experience measurable increases in emotional stability. Their anxiety drops. Their contentment rises. Their sense of self becomes solid. Because when your identity isn't constantly being mirrored back to you in pixels and reactions, it becomes real. You stop editing your life into something digestible. You live it in all its messy, beautiful, unfiltered complexity. And maybe that's the real rebellion, to stay whole in a world that rewards fragments. These are the people who save their stories for when you're sitting across the table, not across a screen. Who measure connection not in comments but in shared silence, in eyes meeting, in laughter that doesn't need witnesses. They carry entire worlds within them, processing deeply, observing constantly, understanding quietly. They don't need applause to validate their existence. They just need to live it. And here's the profound truth they've discovered. Real meaning doesn't need witnesses. Your growth, your heartbreak, your private victories, your quiet acts of courage. They live in memory, not media. And that's not just enough, it's everything. So here's what we've learned about the psychology of those who keep their lives private. They're not hiding. They're protecting what's sacred. They're not detached. They're deeply present. They're not afraid. They're free. They've learned that privacy isn't loneliness. It's intimacy with yourself. They've discovered that silence isn't emptiness. It's depth choosing not to perform. They understand that not everything meaningful has to be shared. That sometimes the most human thing you can do is keep something entirely for yourself. And maybe, just maybe, their silence is a mirror. A reminder that you don't need to broadcast your worth to possess it. That you can walk through this life fully, richly, powerfully, even if nobody's watching. Because the paradox is this: those who live most quietly often feel life most intensely. They absorb what others miss. The way light changes, the pause before someone speaks, the weight of an unspoken truth. They are present. And presence, true, undistracted, wholehearted presence, is the gift this world needs most. So if you're someone who keeps your life private, know this: you're not missing out. You're not falling behind. You're not forgotten. You're doing something brave. You're choosing substance over spectacle, depth over display, truth over performance, and that matters more than any number of likes ever could. If this video resonated with you, if you felt seen in these words, do me a favor, subscribe to this channel. We're building a community of deep thinkers, quiet observers, and people who refuse to turn their lives into content. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next exploration into the human experience. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's struggling with the pressure to perform. Someone who's choosing privacy in a world that demands visibility. But most importantly, drop a comment below. Tell me, are you someone who keeps your life private? What made you choose that path? What have you learned from your silence? Let's learn from each other, because even in a comment section, we can create something real. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for existing exactly as you are, seen or unseen. Until next time, stay quiet, stay deep, and stay true.